Hello, everyone. My name is CLA1 HaldarA, and I'll be talking about systems of resistance to organizational change, especially in the oil industry. The manager that I interviewed works within the oil industry, and one of the biggest symptoms of resistance to organizational change that the industry is facing is due to climate change. This is a passive sort of resistance that's coming from the employees as climate change is bringing in new laws and regulations that are implemented by the government and are also directly affecting oil companies and the industry at large. And this is due to also the initiative that was implemented or that was introduced in 2022 by the United Nations during the climate change conference. The initiative is Net Zero Initiative or Net Zero Carbon Emission Initiative, which essentially means that by 2050, there needs to be a net zero carbon emission by all countries and no later than 2050. Well, the main thing that we know about the oil industry is that they're the biggest carbon emitters in the world. The use of fossil fuels, burning fossil fuels to produce oil and natural gas has now been looked down upon, and now they are transitioning into a more sustainable space where they're looking at more renewable energy to be able to produce oil. Although this is a big change from using fossil fuels to renewable energy, because there are a lot of different changes that will occur in this transition, and it requires a lot of care and attention. It requires research, it requires the right tools and technology to be able to study how this newer approach will be able to be beneficial in the oil industry and not affect the production of oil and natural gas as it already is. And so my interviewee has never really expressed resistance to organizational change, although his employees have. And the resistance came when mass transportation was introduced, which was also in line with the net zero initiative that the company is trying to holistically adapt. And so mass transportation, by introducing them, would reduce cars on the road and also reduce accidents on the road. And it's important to understand the context, as my interviewee lives in Saudi Arabia and there's no form of public transportation. People travel to work in their own personal cars, and this would be a big implementation because this would reduce again a numerous amount of cars on the road, which would lead to also less pollution. And so the resistance from the employees was that there would be a lack of flexibility for when they can come into work. So for example, if an employee wanted to come into work after noon, they would not be able to do so because they would have to leave at a set time when the bus comes and picks them up. And they also do not, another resistance was they do not want to travel with many people. Again, this is a new change, so it's very difficult to adapt right away, but it needs to be articulated well in order for them to be able to adapt this change. Consequently, my interviewee was responsible for the change management, and he was responsible for implementing the mass transit as the primary mode of commute for employees. And the resistance from employees in regards to this change was difficult at first, although when presented to them with proper facts and again really kind of reminding them again of the net zero initiative, it was able to be implemented well. And yes, there is still resistance, although it was implemented by a large amount of employees, which is still a good first step in achieving the net zero initiative within the company itself. The common reasons for resisting change that my interviewee spoke about was behavior, culture, and safety. Behavior, because people are naturally resistant to change. As the status quo becomes a part of your culture, you would be shifting and contradicting from your culture when change is introduced. This will also change behavior naturally. So culture and behavior really go hand in hand. And in Saudi Arabia, let's say, for example, if you wanted to implement a new dress code or a different dress code in the office, then there's definitely going to be some resistance because it could be affected by offending someone's community, a particular community, faith, or any practices. So you have to approach these matters very sensitively. And these are the reasons why people resist change. And so you have to understand what the reasons are and how a proper way would be to address these changes if they are to be implemented. Lastly, safety is an issue. And an example that was given by my interviewee was let's say, new time of work is implemented where employees must stay until 8 p.m. to finish their work and then leave. This could be a safety issue for female employees at the company in Saudi Arabia. For at a later time when they are commuting home, it could become a safety factor. And so this might not be something that they would completely agree to. So there would be resistance from that side. Then resistance to changes that are most difficult to handle, according to the manager I interviewed, was gender-based, culture-based, and financial-based. Gender-based and culture-based, again, really go hand in hand in this way, because when changes really affect a community's particular faith, again, like I mentioned earlier, culture, behavior, then it becomes sensitive and difficult to handle as a manager. And this may require more training for the manager to be able to address these well, as I mentioned earlier. This might require a lot of sensitivity and empathy from their side to be able to communicate this to their own employers in a proper manner. Again, culturally based, let's say, for example, a new rule is introduced where you cannot wear a particular item of clothing to work. How would that person feel? How would you address that to the person, and for them to not take that in an offensive manner? This will be something of a sensitive topic to deal with from the manager's side, and be able to implement that or articulate that well to your employee. Again, similarly to the ones I mentioned above. Financial base was because another example that my interviewee gave was, let's say, introducing a new insurance policy. An insurance policy that has great coverage for all employees. Although this might be great and a great option for top executives, it might not be a great option for lower or not lower employees that are not top executives, and this may be deducted from their paychecks, and so this might not reflect well in the way they want to receive payment from the workplace. And so this requires a lot of, again, understanding the needs and requirements of the employees themselves. This is not something that they may be on board with, but there could be other options, insurance options for them, and that could be more adept to their needs and things like that. So financially, that could be affecting their needs. And so when it comes to people, money, faith, culture, these sensitive topics, it could be very difficult to handle. But again, a proper training, a proper understanding of your employees will enable a manager to be able to address these issues, or let's say changes to them properly. Resisting change at a strategic level is also natural, especially when implementing sustainable practices in the oil industry. The new introducing a different space of way of producing oil in a sustainable way, it cannot be implemented immediately. It needs a lot of, again, testing, practicing, and understanding the new tools and research to understand the sustainable space where they can produce oil in the same manner as they have been doing for several decades. And so this is a big shift of strategy change. And if there are senior VPs to make this decision, they will oppose this change to shift into a more renewable energy space, especially at its inception. These are uncharted waters, and the company who has been doing business in oil and gas and selling it for decades, this is their core business. They know what they've been doing, it's their expertise, and they know how the market works, profitability, and much more. So this is, again, uncharted waters. They have not understood this before, so it's going to require a lot of research and introduction of new tools and technologies to be able to completely adapt to this new space. And the solution for this would be innovative strategy, as Goodman and Dingley speak about in their book. With new advances in technology, managers need to consider not only whether it is time for when it is time to change the technologies currently used, but also whether an evolutionary change is sufficient, or if a revolutionary change is required. So in this case, change is required, as we are seeing this larger issue at hand, which is global warming or climate change. And so changes at these levels are important to take to be able to tackle the larger issue here. And so innovative strategy is a great solution for a problem that as this, or resistance to change as such as this in the oil industry. Prevention of resistance at a strategic level. One of the quotes that really stuck out from my interviewee was, change most often than none is a sweet event. Change being introduced at any time is a high risk. And to implement these changes, they have to be fully experimented, fully tested. If they are not fully tested, these are all predictive and intuitive towards failure. And so you have to understand the new tools, you have to understand the new space, the sustainable space. At a pilot level, it has to be successful, then only it can be implemented at all levels potentially. If it is implemented across all levels without any pilot tests or any experimentation, it will be unsuccessful and people will resist. And lastly, the most challenging approach to management of resistance that the interviewee spoke about was coercion. Coercion is not the proper way or approach to bringing change into management, and it definitely will not bear well with any employees. So again, you have to understand and have empathy towards your employees, and understand their needs, and the proper way to articulate these changes to them so they can understand what the proper steps are in order to completely immerse themselves into this new space within the oil industry. There has to be a way to strategically make them understand and also help them be a part of this change rather than just coercing them to be a part of this change. And these are the resources for my images, and thank you so much.